Adam, you look awesome today.
Thank you. It's my vest. It's a vest day.
There we go.
It's the best day ever. I'm super invested.
Okay.
Stupid dad jokes
I love
on the
it.
Mastery Podcast today. I'm Adam. This is Nick.
Hello.
I'm in my 40s. He's in his 20s.
Yes.
We're here to share little tidbits of information with you to chew on, to take into the future with you on your pursuit of mastery. We like to call our listeners explorers. They're explorers on the journey with us in the pursuit of mastery. So welcome. Today we have a really interesting topic.
Yeah, and I'm really curious, Adam, because we're talking about the pit of despair. And that just sounds terrible. So what is the pit of despair?
It was on, what were those, Raiders of the Lost Ark? Do you remember those movies? You're too young. Never mind. Yeah.
He's in his 40s and I'm in my 20s.
You.
So Raiders of the Lost Ark.
What was his name? I don't know why I can't remember it. Anyway, no, the pit of despair is not filled with snakes or sharp objects. The pit of despair is actually what happens when people are in this state where at the end of the month there's very little money left. So the difference between their income and their expenses is so small that the amount of money they have left makes them feel stuck. And people who feel stuck generally are feeling some fear because they don't want to be stuck forever. So there's a fear of, oh my God, what if it's always this way?
Yep.
And when they start listening to content like ours or reading books around money management, they might start making some headway and they're gaining traction. And then what happens is a car breaks down or there's an illness or they lose their job.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden what happens is they go right back down into this pit of despair where they've gone up. They're trying to get out of that fear and feeling of stuckness.
Yep.
And then they go into that pit of despair. And a couple of things really have to happen at this point.
Okay.
So they have to recommit to making the right decisions to get out of the pit of despair.
Yep.
Because there is a better time coming after that. And number two, they have to realize that those things that happen in the moment, they can be planned for. And so we got to figure out how to create a way and a structure to minimize sort of the surprises financially.
Yeah, got it. And one thing that I also want to add to that is, I have definitely been there, and not only recently have also experienced that. Like you said, the typical emergencies, right? So sometimes I might have a lot of money in the bank, or what I think is a lot, but an emergency will happen, and I will all of a sudden be in the pit of despair.
Yeah.
And I also work with a lot of clients, celebrities, entrepreneurs who make a lot of money, but are still in this pit of despair. So it also is like the feeling, not so much it is the dollar amount, right? But it's also like the feeling that you have, right? And so when you talked about like emergencies or things will come up, I'm curious, do you think that these things come up because they're in the pit of despair? Or do you think because they're in the pit of despair, things happen?
Good question. Chicken or egg question.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I would revert back to, I think Dave Ramsey probably said it at one point, but that if you don't have an emergency fund, you're just inviting Murphy into your home. And you know Murphy, right? Murphy's Law, that when things can go wrong, they will go wrong.
Yeah.
I believe that when I was just out of school, I had $8,000 in credit card debt and was upside down on my car and had all these expenses. I would literally go out to eat with my friends and put it on my credit card because I didn't have a lot of cash in the bank and I wanted to make sure I had cash in the bank. So I kept using credit.
Yep.
But it was a never-ending game that I was playing, right? Or an always losing game that I was playing.
Yeah.
Once I built the emergency fund, all of a sudden most of my emergencies stopped. But when I was chasing that game that I was always losing, my brakes went out, my alternator went bad, I got sick and had expensive prescriptions. So I think there is something about when you're in that pit of despair and you're worried about what will happen, you're actually probably attracting some of what will happen.
Gotcha. Okay.
You think?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah. So, so for our listeners and explorers, what would you say is so? So, what does someone do if they are in the pit of despair? Like, what? How do you get out of that?
Well, there's a couple things, and I wrote about this in Mastery of Money for Students, but you have to play good offense and you have to play good defense.
Okay.
And so good offense is how do you make more money? That might be a side hustle. It might be asking for a raise. It might be waiting tables or starting a resale business or something like that.
Yep.
Playing good defense means you're learning everything you possibly can about how to minimize your expenses. So good defense means that if you are carrying credit card debt, that you're figuring out how do I call the credit card companies and negotiate all of my interest rates down so that I'm not sending in as much every single month, and instead, or the money that I'm sending in is actually going to principal, not just to interest.
Yep.
So what I found in my early 20s when I had lots of credit card debt was if the interest rate was at 20% and I was paying no attention to it, the majority of the money I was sending in was just going to pay interest.
Yeah.
None of it was notching out what I actually owed.
Yeah.
So I think being really diligent about how are you going to save money as well. How do you play good defense?
Gotcha. Okay. And are we going to be covering that in terms of the next?
We are.
Okay, good. Because I'm feeling a little despairful, despairing.
Yes.
Whatever. However.
And in fact, I want to teach people the actual script that I use to negotiate some of my credit cards from 20% down to, in some cases, 0% for a fixed period, like 12 months.
Oh, wow.
And in some cases, it was a 1.9 or 2.9% for 3 years or for the length of the card. And there's some very specific scripts that we'll teach you in upcoming episodes.
Very cool. Awesome. Anything else that you want to say?
Well, the pit of despair, once you get out of it, there's something on the other side. And on the other side of that is, first of all, more money at the end of the month, which is a good thing.
That's always good.
We always want more money at the end of the month, not more month at the end of our money. And did you get that?
Yeah.
Carry the one?
Yeah.
And so what happens once you have more money at the end of the month is you start to begin feeling more hopeful. And once you start feeling hopeful, which we'll get into on tomorrow's episode, hope is about, well, a speaker, a friend of mine, one time said, hope is the feeling you have that the feeling you have isn't permanent.
Hope is the feeling you have when the feeling you have is not permanent.
Yeah. That the feeling you have isn't permanent.
That the feeling.
So if I'm in despair,
Yep.
I can have hope that this feeling of despair is not permanent. And that's what we're working towards, is how to get to being hopeful as it relates to money.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I am fully invested in this conversation.
I'm hopeful you'll wear a vest next time.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye, everybody.